The advantages of Stoicism are surprisingly far-reaching. The disciplines of ancient Stoics are much more commonly practiced today than many people might think. That's because an awful lot of modern citizens use Stoic strategies without realizing. I certainly did. I was working to perfect my Stoicism long before I became a Stoic. As an adolescent, I was very quick to anger. My mood was pretty uncontrolled. In emotional terms, I was like a rudderless ship lost in the middle of a vast and extremely stormy sea. I was quite literally at the mercy of every passing stranger whose behaviours, however insignificant in reality, would determine my emotional quality of life for hours. A wrong word here, a disapproving or critical glance there, would upset me beyond all proportion. Then, in my late teens, I started searching. It was clear that I couldn't continue in the same vein if I wanted even a sniff of quality of life. So I set about finding an alternative way to try to manage my moods. That led me first to Old Norse philosophy with all its fatalistic notions and acceptance of misfortune. In fact, I still use the same aspirational logo I designed for myself from several Norse runes even today. The logo is an amalgam of 5 runes which together symbolize the motto I created for myself over 35 years ago. The self, as the spiritual warrior, leads to wholeness, which brings protection for the future. Next, I tried Christianity, which moved me a little closer to emotional control, although in truth, the tranquility promised by the church never really materialized. It was always undermined by the guilt that Christian doctrine engenders. However, Christianity did move me a little further along the road to Stoicism, just as the Old Norse philosophies had done. In reality, that's not too surprising, since much of both Christianity and Old Norse mythology is a straight lift from earlier Stoic teachings. It's hard to read the Beatitudes or the epistles of Paul without being reminded of Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus. Eventually, I discovered Stoicism, beginning with a few odd stories from Seneca that found their way into the textbooks I came across during my nurse training. Much of Seneca's work on anger and other emotions has become a largely uncredited but nonetheless significant part of modern mental health training. This led me to read the 20th century therapist Albert Ellis, from whose work I was directed back to the earlier work of Epictetus and his handbook, the Enchiridion. The handbook of Epictetus is perhaps the most straightforward introduction to the basic principles of Stoicism ever to come out of the ancient world, and I would thoroughly recommend it. The other, accessible and relatively straightforward text would be Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. A quick search online will reveal various versions of each of these. I recommend them as excellent starting points. What these and other Stoic texts have done for me is allow me to develop a philosophy, a set of values and principles by which to live. That isn't to say that the ancient Stoics told me what to do. That's not the case at all. Rather, Stoicism equips us with the tools we need to determine our own path through life, to gain perspective and even wisdom to one degree or another. Stoicism allows me to maintain focus and clarity of action. It's a mental discipline that leads to contentment, tranquility, and an attitude of benevolence towards our fellow men. That doesn't mean that Stoics never oppose others. On the contrary, opposing injustice and working toward the common good is a fundamental part of Stoicism. At least it is for me, just as it was for Marcus Aurelius and Cato, whose sense of justice eventually led to his death at the hands of his enemies. Stoics aren't just passive acceptors who quietly acquiesce in the face of evil. Rather, they're decisive actors who let rational thought guide their behaviours rather than emotion. That to me is the key to Stoicism. It's a life directed by rational thought, by intellect, that isn't undermined by emotion. Some people assume that this means that Stoics are ultimately emotionless, but that's not true. Rather, Stoics are able to understand and manage their emotions. They subjugate emotion to intellect as a way to maintain contentment, but that's not the same as being dull. Stoics are as capable of emotion as anyone else. They're just not the slave of emotion. Stoics are more likely to enjoy happiness and less likely to experience distress than non-Stoics. That's all. What's not to like? The sum of these benefits is easy to define. A life well lived. If you like the sound of that, keep watching. There's more to come. I'm Stuart Sorensen. You can find me at www.mindthecaretraining.com. If you found this video useful or helpful in any way, please feel free, share it around. And if you click on the little character icon that's in the center of your screen right now, you can subscribe to the channel and never miss a video. Thank you for watching.